Imagine walking through the forest and hearing a low, thunderous growl, not from far away, but right behind you. You turn, and it's a massive bear, but instead of attacking, it steps in front of someone to protect them. That someone is a man, completely calm, standing still as if he's with old friends, because he is. This is the unbelievable true story of a man who once rescued two helpless bear cubs. Left orphaned and vulnerable in the middle of nowhere, these cubs had no chance of survival until he stepped in. But what no one expected was what happened after. Not only did the man raise the cubs, feed them, play with them, and even sleep beside them in a makeshift den, but over time they began to see him as one of their own. Today, these full-grown bears don't just live near him, they guard him like loyal wolves. They growl at anyone who gets too close, keeping strangers at bay with an instinct that says, "This man is ours." Stay with us because this isn't just a story about bears. It's about loyalty, survival, and a bond that defies nature itself. The man's name is Elias Monroe, a quiet soul who found peace in solitude. Years ago, Elias walked away from the noise of city life, trading skyscrapers for pine trees and traffic for birdsong. He settled deep in the northern wilderness, miles from the nearest town, building a small log cabin with his own hands. His days were filled with firewood chopping, fishing in the nearby creek, and sipping coffee as morning fog rolled in. Elias wasn't always this way. In his former life, he'd worked as a paramedic, saving lives, rushing through crowded streets, facing trauma on a daily basis. But after losing his wife in a car accident, the city became unbearable. The forest offered him something the city never could: healing. In the stillness of nature, he learned how to live again, not for the past, but for the present moment. He didn't expect companionship out there. He didn't want it, really. He kept to himself, journaling his days, occasionally crossing paths with deer or the rare fox. But Elias had a soft heart for animals. He left scraps for raccoons in winter and made sure birds always had seed. "Everything out here survives by helping each other," he once wrote in his journal. Maybe that's the truest kind of family. Little did he know, the forest wasn't done with him yet. Fate was about to bring him face to face with something bold, vulnerable, and life-changing. It was early spring, when snow still clung stubbornly to the ground, but the air hinted at warmth. Elias had ventured deeper into the woods than usual, searching for deer antlers shed during winter. The forest was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you listen harder. That's when he heard it, a faint, high-pitched whimper. Then another. He paused, turning toward the sound. It was coming from a fallen tree, half covered in snow and moss. As he stepped closer, he saw movement. Two tiny, fur-covered creatures, barely able to lift their heads. Bear cubs, no mother in sight. Elias looked around, heart racing. The first rule in the wild is simple. If you see cubs, leave. The mother is always near. But minutes passed, then an hour, and no sign of her. The cubs were weak, one trembling, the other barely moving. Something was wrong. Against every instinct of survival, Elias made a choice. He removed his coat, wrapped the cubs gently, and whispered, "You shouldn't be out here alone." He cradled them against his chest and headed home through the woods, every step shadowed by doubt and an odd sense of duty. That night, he stayed awake beside the fireplace, feeding the cubs goat milk from a dropper, unsure if they had survived the night. Their breathing was shallow, but they were alive. And somehow, they trusted him, nuzzling into his warmth like they'd found safety. Elias didn't know it yet, but that moment sealed something unbreakable. These cubs had lost their mother, but in him, they found something just as fierce: a protector, a new kind of family. The first few weeks were the hardest. Elias had no experience raising wild animals, especially not bears. Every hour was a guessing game. He named them: Bruno, the larger one with a stubborn stare, and Luna, the smaller cub who clung to his pant leg like a frightened child. He built them a soft bedding space in the corner of the cabin, near the fire. At first, they slept constantly, too weak to explore. Elias fed them warm goat milk every few hours, holding their tiny bodies close, rubbing their bellies to help them digest. He watched over them like a father watching newborns, notebook in hand, recording their progress. As the days turned into weeks, the cubs grew stronger. They waddled through the cabin, climbed onto furniture, chewed on firewood, and chased after Elias's boots. Bruno had a mischievous streak. He once knocked over a pot of stew, growled at the rising steam, and ran away squealing. Luna was quieter, always watching Elias with wide, curious eyes. They had different personalities, but one thing was clear. They saw him as their world. Elias made them an outdoor enclosure beside the cabin, with logs to climb and rocks to nap on. But they never strayed far. Even when the forest called, they'd return at dusk, curling up on the porch beside his chair, growling softly if a squirrel got too close. He knew this couldn't last forever. They were wild animals. Someday nature would call them back. But each time Elias looked into their eyes, he saw something more than instinct, something gentler, deeper. They weren't just surviving, they were bonding. And in doing so, Elias was healing too. In saving the cubs, he'd unknowingly saved himself. As spring gave way to summer, the bond between Elias and the cubs became something extraordinary. They were no longer just animals in his care. They were companions. Where Elias went, they followed. Into the woods, down by the creek, even when he chopped firewood or repaired his roof, Bruno and Luna were there, watching with alert eyes, mimicking his movements in playful confusion. They played together daily. Elias would toss sticks, and Bruno would crash after them like a clumsy puppy. Luna loved games of hide and seek, ducking behind trees and popping out with a soft huff. At night, they lay beside him under the stars, their heavy breathing a rhythmic lullaby in the quiet wilderness. They communicated without words. Elias learned their growls. Soft ones meant contentment, sharp ones meaning alert. He responded with calm tones, soft whistles, and gentle touch. It was as if they had created a language all their own, one built on trust. When he went fishing, they'd wait by the shore, watching like sentinels. When hikers passed near the trail, the cubs would instinctively place themselves between Elias and the strangers. Low growls rumbling in their throats. It was nature rewritten. Most people would never believe it. How could they? A man living in harmony with two wild bears. But for Elias, it felt natural, like family. The forest wasn't lonely anymore. It pulsed with life, laughter, and loyalty. Something was changing in them, but something was changing in him too. It started subtly. Elias first noticed it when a delivery man came up the trail with supplies, flour, oats, and a new axe. Bruno stood rigid at the edge of the clearing, ears perked, growling low. Luna stayed closer, but her eyes tracked every movement the stranger made. When the man stepped a little too close to Elias, both cubs let out sharp warning sounds. The delivery was dropped quickly. The man didn't return for months. At first, Elias thought it was coincidence, but the pattern repeated. Hikers, lost campers, even wildlife. Anytime someone or something approached too quickly, the bear stepped in front of Elias. Not aggressively, but instinctively. Protective, loyal. Bruno, now nearly 200 pounds, had grown into a formidable presence. His stance alone was enough to make strangers back away. Luna, though smaller, had razor-sharp awareness, always the first to sense movement in the trees. Their instincts didn't just keep Elias safe. They made him feel seen, defended, cherished. One evening, a pack of coyotes came too close. Elias was lighting a fire when Luna suddenly rose and released a deep, guttural growl. Bruno followed suit, charging toward the tree line. The coyotes scattered without a fight. It was then Elias realized he was no longer just a protector. He was being protected. This wasn't just a bond. It was a pack. An unspoken code of loyalty had formed between them. He saved their lives, and now they would risk theirs to guard his. It was a late autumn afternoon when it happened. Elias was out near the ridge, gathering firewood before the season's first snow. The bears, as usual, trailed behind, silent, alert. But something felt off. The forest was too quiet. No bird song, no rustling wind, just stillness. Then, from behind a rock outcrop, a man appeared, disheveled, wild-eyed, and holding a rifle. Elias froze. He didn't recognize the man, but one thing was clear. He wasn't just passing through. The man started shouting, accusing Elias of trespassing, claiming the land was his. Elias raised his hands, trying to calm him, but the man stepped forward, weapon shaking in his grip. Before Elias could respond, a deep, thunderous roar shattered the silence. Bruno surged forward, placing himself directly between Elias and the threat, muscles taut, teeth bared. Luna flanked the other side, eyes fixed, body low and ready to pounce. The stranger stumbled back, face draining of color. In that moment, it didn't matter what he was planning. He turned and ran, rifle clattering behind him. Elias dropped to his knees, breath shaking. The bear stayed still, watching the woods until the threat was truly gone. That day, Elias didn't just feel protected. He felt chosen. A hiker had filmed Elias and the bears from afar, uploading the clip online. It went viral within days. Man lives with bears who protect him like bodyguards. Some called it beautiful. Others called it dangerous. Wildlife authorities got involved. Reporters showed up near his land, shouting questions from behind fences. Many people admired the bond. They saw it as proof that wild animals could love and trust. But critics argued it was reckless, unnatural. They said the bears belonged in the wild, not beside a man with no fences. Elias refused to cage them. They stay because they choose to, he told a journalist. That's more powerful than any fence. Some officials threatened to relocate the bears, but every time someone approached with that intent, Bruno and Luna made it clear. They weren't leaving without a fight. And Elias wasn't letting go without one either. Today, Elias still lives in that same cabin, older now, a little slower, but never alone. Bruno and Luna, fully grown and majestic, remain by his side. They roam the forest freely, but always return by nightfall, curling up beside the porch like loyal hounds. No cages, no commands, just trust. Visitors, if they come at all, stay behind the tree line, watched closely by two silent guardians. Elias doesn't mind. He never wanted crowds, only peace. And in the heart of the forest with two bears at his side, that's exactly what he's found.